Hi, my name is Martijn. Thank you for joining this session. I am a technical marketing architect within VMware for vRealize Network Insight, and I'm very proud to present the vRealize Network Insight Toolkit. I'm going to assume that you've got some prior knowledge to vRNI of what all data it collects and how you can use it for network troubleshooting, monitoring, those type of things. But I'm just going to focus on the use cases that help automate within using that toolkit that I built. So the toolkit appliance itself is a Fling, and it's out now, so you can go grab it from the Fling's website. Before I get started, I do need to present this disclaimer, but everything that I'm going to be talking about is already available, so nothing is on the roadmap or anything like that. So the vRealize Network Insight Toolkit, what is it? Well, it is an appliance. It's an OVA appliance that you can deploy into your environment directly next to vRealize Network Insight. It then connects to vRNI on a one-on-one mapping. So you set it up, and I will show you that in the demo, where you link it to a specific vRNI instance, and then you can use that vRNI instance to, well, one thing, use that DSX integration in order to get application constructs that have been discovered or created within vRNI, get that into VMware ACX as mobility groups. So you don't have to manually type over the VM names or create the mobility groups when you are in a migration scenario here. Also talking about migration scenarios, the migration planner built within the vRNI toolkit is a way to extract a lot of data from the vRNI instance that you can then use to plan out and design your networking design or networking topology on the destination side when you are migrating either applications or networks towards another destination. So it has things like packets per second and spikes and percentiles. It groups your data, your networking traffic data by specific network. So if you are migrating on a per VLAN basis, it'll tell you what you need in order to support those networks on the destination side, so you don't end up with an overloaded network. And then thirdly, there is the embedded SDKs. And one of the great things about vRNI is that all of the data that it's provide, you can extract that. And we've provided wrappers around the API calls that you need to do. So the Python SDK, as we call it, is a Swagger client that's automatically generated on every version release. So all of the public APIs, endpoints, and API models are all available within the Python SDK. And then there's also the PowerShell module, vRNI, which I built, that you can use to do one-liners against vRNI. So you could build PowerShell scripts to retrieve data or set conversion, like importing data sources, your switches, your vCenters into vRNI without doing that manually. Those type of things are inside those SDKs, but this appliance has them built in. And you've actually got a pretty cool menu on how to start them, but I will show you that in the demo. Speaking about that menu, the web-based shell, that's another feature of the toolkit where you can just launch into a SSH connection using the browser. And that's using a web SSH console own container that's running inside this toolkit. So you don't have to like start up an SSH session. You can just do it from the browser, which just makes it a little bit easier. To dive in a little bit deeper into each of those use cases, which are most popular, I would say. One of them is the DSX integration, where vRealize Network Insight is used to discover the applications, discover dependencies, application dependency mapping. It's get used in order to map out the requirements, the network requirements for the destination site. So how much traffic is going to be expected on the destination, maybe how much egress traffic, so internet traffic, and therefore costs will be incurred when you pick up this environment and migrate it to another public cloud or another destination, doesn't matter. So application discovery comes into play here first. Then we use or load up the vRNI toolkit. You can load up all of the applications from there and then sync it towards VMware ACX as a mobility group. And if you're not familiar with ACX or those mobility groups, ACX facilitates the migration. So it replicates the VM to the destination side, and then also does things like layer 2 extension, so you don't have to re-IP your VMs. And mobility groups are basically like containers of VMs that you migrate all at once. So in the vRNI sense, that mobility group container with those VMs, that's called an application. So this translates the applications towards mobility groups just with a couple presses of the button without manually having to do that. And then VMware ACX migrates it somewhere. All right. I mentioned that menu a little bit earlier. So when you load up the web console within the toolkit, you get like a cool shell option menu where you can select between the Python SDK, the PowerShell, or just a regular bash shell within the toolkit. The Python SDK preloads a couple of environment variables and puts you into the Python SDK directory. vRNI loads PowerShell core, of course, because it's a Linux VM. And then also imports the vRNI module, so you can basically just start using the vRNI from there. And a bash shell if you just want to poke around on the appliance itself. I will come back to in the demo as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demo how to deploy the OVA, and I'm going to do that real quick using a video because I don't want to wait on the deployment itself. And then I'm going to jump into the setup and the basic features from within the toolkit, and also run a couple of these scripts. Right, so yeah, that works. So start off, I mean, it's a regular OVA, so you can deploy it as an OVF template. I've downloaded it already to this environment. You can select it, and then there's a property setup that you need to do during the OVA wizard. So it's not like that you have to log into the appliances after you've deployed it and set the like IP configuration and things. No, it'll guide you through the network setups as well. So select the VM network over here, and then there's the root password and the admin password, and these have to be a little bit complex. So that's why I've also got that warning over there. You can put in your NTP servers, your host name, and then also what kind of networking configuration do I want to get. So DSP or static. I'm always a fan of static, just so you know what's there and you don't have any requirements on the TCP server. Right, so IP address, and then lastly the prefix, where you put in the subnet, and then it's ready to go. Just like a regular OVA appliance deployment. And then once this gets going, I'm using the magic of video and forwarding quickly in order to get this thing done. So once it's been deployed, just power it up. And this is where you have to wait a couple minutes. So just go ahead and grab a cup of coffee if you're deploying this. Mostly because there are a couple of steps that it takes when it's initially boots. So the first time that it boots, it'll configure the network settings, and it'll configure the application. Here we go. It'll configure the toolkit for the first initial configuration. So, and talking about that, let's get out of this video and just show you that in the environment itself. So this is a freshly set up vRNI toolkit, and the first time that you enter it, you get the setup wizard because it knows that it's not been set up before. So over here, you supply your vRNI platform instance. Excuse me. So basically, what you do here is give the hostname or IP address of that vRNI platform and a username in order to validate whether vRNI is actually working. So username, password, but these are not stored to the system yet. So every single time that you log into the vRNI toolkit, you use the vRNI credentials in order to log in. And those credentials are also used in order to do the API calls towards vRNI, meaning that if you have an admin user, you can do everything. But if you have a member or an auditor user, you might not be able to create applications, for example, or you might not be able to do the migration planning because that requires admin credentials. And I don't have any permission checks in this thing yet, but that's a future feature. So when you connect to vRNI, it'll give you the SSL thumbprint. You can make sure that it's okay, and I trust this. Sure, so that's fine. And then once that's done, then you can open up the vRNI toolkit, and it welcomes you with the features that are available. So we've got the built-in features like that DSX Integration and the migration planner. We've got the web console. And then on top of those SDKs, the Python SDK and the PowerVRNI, we have these example scripts available within those SDKs. So all of these examples are basically just standalone scripts that you can run via the web console. And those are also available within the GitHub repository of these SDKs. But you can use these as inspiration, or you can just run them if you just want to bulk import applications, for example. Or one of my favorites is the application backup and restore, where you can grab all of the applications from one vRNI instance and then restore them into another vRNI instance, or copy those applications over, basically. But there's a lot here that you can either just run or get inspiration from. And the same goes for the PowerVRNI example. So you've got a bulk import for the applications, but also for the data sources. So if you want to add vCenters or switches all at once, you can use those example scripts. But I'll get to those examples a little bit as well. Let's just run a couple of these. So one of the things that we have is the DSX integration, where we can load all of the applications from vRNI and then selectively sync them towards the ACX environment. And I actually forgot to open up ACX, so let's do that as well. Yes, this is unsafe. I love this loader screen. So in the meantime, we've got the applications loaded from vRNI. It basically it's just an overview of what applications are there and what are the member VMs of those applications and on which vCenter is located. And the vCenter part is also important because ACX has a one-on-one relationship with vCenter. So you need to select the right vCenter when you sync these applications towards ACX mobility groups. Otherwise, it won't know where those VMs are. Oh yeah, that's right. And then let's have a peek at the migration tab over here. There's a couple of examples that I've already done, but these have date timestamps against it. And I'm recording this in September, so you know that that these are not from now. But basically what I can do is I can look for one of the applications that I know is on a specific vCenter that is attached to this ACX. And I can also do two. Let's do two. Then I can export to ACX. So it looks at what clouds is ACX connected to, what are the connectors that are linked to it. So I can also select to which destination cloud I want to synchronize these apps. So the source vCenter is always linked because of that one-on-one connection between ACX and the vCenter. And then I can select the destination. And in this case, I've got just one destination inside VMware VMC, so a VMC and AWS environment. But if you've got multiple destinations linked to ACX, you could just pick and choose which ones you want to do. So the selected applications, I've got two of these with all of these VMs in it. And there's a status icon over here, which is now gray. But if I start to sync, it'll turn green on both, I should hope. Yeah, there we go. And then within ACX, you have these mobility groups that have now been added with those VMs that were in the application construct within vRNI. It took a little. So we've got 2 of these mobility groups because I've got 2 applications. And then now from here, I can start with the actual migration itself, but I'm not going to go through that because this is not an ACX session. But just like this is a very quick way and very easy way to get from the application discovery within vRNI, planning out, making groups, so like making a ACX migrate group, a migration wave as they call it, and then syncing them towards ACX for the actual migration. All right, let's move on to the built-in web terminal here. So this is like I mentioned, it's a web terminal where you can start up the Python or the PowerShell SDK, but there's a authentication here because it's a container. It's a baked-in open source container that's running this appliance. So you need to authenticate against the appliance itself. Now I've already done that, so I'm not getting asked for that credentials. But if you're opening up this for the first time, you need to provide the admin credential that you have set with the password when you deployed the appliance. Once it's there, you can choose between the Python SDK, the Power vRNI, or just a regular bash shell. But let's try vRNI for now. Oh, there we go. So this loads PowerShell core, the Power vRNI module, and then I could like see what kind of commands I can already do with Power vRNI. So I can look at all of these things and try all of these commandlets if I'd like to. But as the announcements also say, I need to start with connect vRNI server. I should know better than to resize my screen. Oh, hey. Come on. Oh, well. And of course, this looks so much better in my native resolution, but that's fine. Server. So I'm giving it the vRNI platform appliance again, and then a username that was that toolkit at local.com, and I want to use local authentication. By default, Power vRNI looks at the domain name, so the @ to determine whether it's a local or an LDAP authentication. But in this case, the local.com is actually not the default local domain. So I want to specify that it's a local user. And then this is very, very, oh, 1 second. Let me just do that using the input. So I know it's a little bit garbled here, but you can see the connect vRNI server commandlet over here. You give it the vRNI platform, the username, and then the password is being requested manually. And then once that is successful, you get a authorization token, an authentication token, and the expiry. So I've got a few hours before this expires, so that's all good. And then once you are authenticated, you can start using any of these commandlets. So let's say I want to get all of the data stores. I'm not sure why it's still. So vRNI is not just a networking tool, right? So it has information around everything within the vCenter. So you can open up the data stores or the VMs or the port groups or the host or the CPU usage, all of that. And if I look at get vRNI data store, I get all of the data stores that are discovered within vRNI. I can also get more information around these data stores by providing them as the entity ID. So if I give that command-line the entity ID, I get more information like space used and all of those things. But for now, I'm just gonna exit out of this one and go to the migration planning scenario. So this kind of deserves an entire session on its own, but I'm gonna recap it in a very brief way. But the migration planning tool basically logs into vRealize Network Insight, the platform appliance, runs commands on that platform appliance, and then interprets the data that comes back from it. So all of those commands are ways or are commands to extract data about networks from the vRNI data set. And what we have here is we have the platform details, where you need to provide the platform hostname or IP address, and then also the password for the support user. And this has to be the support user, otherwise it won't be able to log into the appliance itself. And then those networks that I talked about, of which this feature is going to get all of the data from, are networking groups or grouped by networks. So what we have is we have a network group name, and then inside that network group name, you can get, or you can put the networks that you want to bundle together when you are migrating them. So for example, if you've got one SDDC and then you've got an SDDC2, so you've got two SDDCs of which you are migrating towards, whether that be VMware Cloud AWS or new on-prem VCF SDDCs or AVS or GCV, it doesn't matter. Anything that's one destination for the migration. And then you can put in the VLAN IDs, or you can also put in VXLANs or Geneva or segments over here. So anything that's in L2 network, so just a contained subnet that vRNI recognize. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it to this and use, let's just do 11 and 21. You can specify the amount of days to retrieve that data for, and I always like to get 7 days because that's like a default rotation, complete week. And then if you do want to leave some VMs behind, it'll exclude these VMs from those calculations. But I'm just gonna leave this going. So this goes in and does a bunch of steps, and this does take a while, so I'm not going to wait until the runtime. But it creates a mapping file with these networking groups. It generates some shell scripts that it then goes out and runs on the vRNI platform. It runs those commands on the vRNI platform. It interprets that information from the vRNI platform, pulls it back to the vRNI appliance, and then gives it to you as an Excel file, summarized Excel file. Yep, and I need to open up another one because this one has not run this yet. So once you've run it, it'll provide you with the output, and you can also open up the results over here to get previously run of these migration scenarios, where you can then have a date where it's been running. So this is the last date that I ran this script on this instance. And then you have a bunch of CSV files where you've got raw data. So let me see inter VLAN, for example. So this is the VLANs that you've given the network groups, and it'll provide you like with how much packets and how much bandwidth is going through it. So we actually have the search query that was used as well. Go away. The search query that was used as well, just for reference. I mean, you can even open up the search engine within vRNI and then plug in that search. But the most important thing is this output, right? So you have the maximum packets per second, The percentile. So if you want to get averages and play around with those averages in order to make sure that you've got the right support or the right maximum limits of these packets per second. So you get all of these values within these CSVs. Oh, I don't want to save it. Oh, go away. You get all of these values, but honestly, the easiest way is just to get to that Excel file, mostly because that summarizes everything. All of these CSV files you can use to dive a little bit more deep into the actual analysis, but this is a little bit easier. Oh, and this is also a little bit unfilled out, but that's fine. So you get the networking groups over here, and then the packets per second, the bandwidth that goes through it, so the bytes per second, and then also split up between those percentiles. So if you want to average out the spikes and the network traffic, you can do that as well. We've got the intra and the inter VLAN traffic, and this is not a good data set. But this information, like, you get a very good view of what the network requirements are for specific networks when you are migrating them, which is important because you don't want to go over that those limits of to which you are migrating. So yeah, be sure that you make sure to interpret it. And again, this feature itself deserves a single session on its own, but I will post some more information around how to actually use this information a little bit more. But let's go back to the Python SDK in this case, just to give you also a glance of how that works. Basically, it's just sets up the environment variable that you need in order to import the Swagger client that has been generated. And then you've been put into the Python SDK directory. And then you can start with these examples, see what they need. And for example, let's try and create a backup of the applications as the last info. So if I do help, you get all of the parameters, because even the examples have a lot of examples and help built in. And you need to provide a platform IP address, username. You can provide the domain name, so local or LDAP. You can even connect via VRDM if you want, or you can provide the API token that you can use to connect to vRNI cloud, to the cloud services. Also provide a cloud location, and then backup and action. But in this case, let's go for platform IP. That's going to be that pre-GA username. That was that toolkit add local. Passwords, and this is bad, but sure, it's clear text, that's fine. This one, application backup YAML, apps.yaml, and then application action is safe. Right, so if I run this, it goes out and connects to the vRNI instance, and then stores all of the applications within this YAML. And you can then look at how that's connected. So it basically gets the raw information from vRNI and then puts that into a YAML file. So everything within that application is right here. So we have an application construct over here. It has an entity ID with the internal ID. And then we define the tiers. And then how we define the tiers themselves. So is it just like a list of VMs, or are we searching for specific VMs? So this is a dynamic tier, basically, instead of just listing a couple of VMs. And if I can find a list of VMs over here, I can end with that. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is one of example where we've got this application name, and then we have a member list where we just look at a VM list. So these are just two VMs that are then listed within this this tier. And if I wanted to, I could restore that just by changing the restore backup action. Okay, that's it. I'm completely running out of time. All right. So this Fling is available on the Fling's website. It is GA. You can find it. You can download it. You can try it out. I've also got a video on there that goes a little bit further into the features that I've talked about so far. If you like this session, please take the survey. Let me know what I can do better. That'd be great. And for now, I'd like to thank you for your attendance.